Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back once again. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster, and I want to thank you guys for joining me for another Age Reforged replay battle. Today I've got more .97 action. This is a new 2v2 that was sent in to me, and it is apparently amazing. So I'm really excited to get into it with you guys. Without any further ado, let's take a look at some of the army comps here, and then we can jump into the replay itself. Hope you all enjoy it. And so the first army we're going to start with today is the forces of Imladris. And this is the army, or rather the player commanding this army is the one who sent me in the replay. So big thank you to Mech DI King of the North for supporting the channel. And as Imladris, he's brought one unit here of the Norwegian Cavalry, who in .96 I believe only have about 10 additional charge value, something like that. Whereas in .97 they have a little bit more oomph to them. They have about 15 charge value, making them a pretty solid light lancer pick. That being said, they are a little bit less sturdy than a lot of the other options on the Imladris roster. You can, however, upgrade their armor, which is what DI has chosen to do here, which I think brings them up to about 9 or so armor. So they can be pretty sturdy, fairly, well, pardon me, fairly cost-effective, and all around as I said, a pretty solid light lancer pick. Over here, we have something a little bit heavier, the Eldarinway Standard Bearers, one of, I think, 2 units on Imladris' roster that have the full 820 charge bonus. These guys, however, unlike the Doomsmen of Varda, who we're going to see in this matchup as well, are not 2 HP. So they're heavily armored, heavily shielded, but they're a little bit more vulnerable than some other elite cavalry regiments in the game. Here we have the Riders of Brunnen. We're going to have 2 companies of them with the first of their armor upgrade. And they look pretty damn cool. You can upgrade them a second time to give them that shining silver plate that Imladris is so well known for. Let's move on now to part of his infantry lineup. Got a couple of Swords of Rivendell, a couple of Archers of Rivendell, 2 units of the Eldarinway Hedu Hatal, 1 unit of the Imladris Sentries, 1 company of Eldarinway Archers, and I think that pretty well does it, except for this 1 unit here of Support Bodyguard. We have the Keepers of Iglos. Keepers of Iglos, multiple HP, solid morale bonus for units nearby. I believe it's +5 and 50 meters, so it's not quite as large as it used to be. It's about half the size, in fact, but still, for the Elves of Imladris who already have quite high morale scores as a base, this is a very important unit that will help them fight for pretty well ever. And then here we have another company of the Swords of Rivendell, which I think makes just 2. Yeah, 1, 2, there we go. Not a lot of oomph on the infantry lineup, but the real power of Imladris tends to lie in their cavalry wings. Over here, another company of the Riders of Brunnen, and of course, the deadly, the beautiful Doomsmen of Varda, the Elven Knights. Very strong, a little bit less shield value in this particular build, which makes them slightly less powerful in close quarters, like a very minuscule amount, and their armor upgrade, instead of being 25, has gone up to 50, so it's a little bit harder to make them extremely tanky, but still nonetheless worth your while if you decide to do so. That does it for DI's army. Let's move on now to his ally. This is going to be the forces of Numenor, being played by Mech FFA Muffins. So a couple of clanmates here teaming up together, and Muffins has brought 2 companies of the Romana Marksmen. They are not going to have their armor upgrades. However, for those of you that are new to the faction of Numenor, Romana Marksmen are very tanky indeed. They have about 8 armor base, 4 shields, and I think like 9 or 10 damage in melee. Like, they are solid infantry after the fact, a little bit lighter on the shield value, as units that fire with their missile weapon but don't have their shield equipped in the one hand while they do so tend to be. It's just a means of representing the stats of a model accurately while also keeping it balanced. So just a little tidbit there for you. Behind them have the Temple Guard. I absolutely love AP Archers. I had a conversation recently with somebody who wasn't a big fan of them, because they weren't terribly useful against infantry, and I would say that if you are using these guys against infantry, you are using them poorly. The Temple Guard and AP Archers generally are quite low on ammunition, they are high on damage, and of course armor piercing, making them ideal for sniping out high value assets, such as enemy knights, for example. And that is where I think the AP Archers tend to shine, when you can use them against heavily armored knights, especially when those knights are not, you know, they're kind of looking the other way and they aren't able to get their full shield value or any shield value whatsoever. These units can be absolutely devastating about them. So use them to pick off important assets, and they will serve you well. Moving on now to the meat and potatoes of Muffin's army. We've got 3 companies here, the Alcarondas Legion. 1, 2, 3. Ooh, a little bit of lag there. 1, 2, 3. You can see the Alcarondas with their Numenor-specific reskin. The Umbar faction has the Alcarondas Legion as well, but they're a little bit more skinned to be in line with Umbar's kind of later in the timeline appearance and the yeah, you know what I'm trying to say. They look more like an Umbar unit, and they're a little bit lighter, a little bit less metal and stuff on them, and a little bit more fabric, seeing as they fight in the desert. Over here, Remnant Sentinels, all fully upgraded, making them extremely tanky. Very powerful units indeed. My only real critique is that I would like to see these spear tips change to something a little bit more akin to the Gondor Spearmen and the spears that they use on Taro's models. I think that'd be a little bit more fitting for the Remnant Sentinels. In any case, this makes a solid anvil to the Numenor army, and with all the cavalry that his ally Imladris has brought, that could serve Muffins in excellent stead. Moving on over here, got some cavalry. Numenor traditionally very limited in the amount of cavalry that they can bring. All of their units are over 1,000 gold, and they're all capped at 1. But we have 1 unit of Numenorian Lancers here, 1 unit of Eldalande Nobles. For those of you who are not aware, this is a new bodyguard type being added in 0.97, which for the time being at least is exclusive to Numenor. This is a melee cavalry bodyguard, not quite as potent as melee knights, but still nonetheless very strong for dealing with enemy cavalry, which is exactly what this unit is designed to combat. Moving on over here, got the Alcarondas Faithful, a melee knight unit, a little bit smaller, but a little bit less expensive as a consequence, and that's going to round off the Umbar cavalry lineup. And then last, but certainly not least, we have the Temple Executioners. For those of you who are wondering where the inspiration for this helmet comes from, if you've played Shadows of War, or is it Shadow of War? I don't know, I haven't played the game myself, but I have watched some videos, and it's based on the helmet of... Okay, spoiler alert if you haven't played the game, plug your ears. It's based on the helmet of Isildur when he becomes a Nazgul, so kind of a cool little tidbit there. But in any case, that's going to do it for the blue team's lineup today. Let's go ahead and see what their opponents are bringing to the battlefield. Across the field from the host of Imladris, we have the new and improved Dol Amroth. This army is going to be commanded by Engsfitz, and he's bringing a lot of their potent new Parathil units. A couple units here of the Parathil Randirim. Very able horse archers, quite well armored. Really good accuracy, good range, good damage. Not quite as powerful as the Imladris equivalents, but they're a little bit less expensive to compensate. Meanwhile, over here, got the Parathil Horse Guard, 2 companies of them, a melee cavalry unit. They can throw down in melee with units that are a good deal more expensive than they are. Parathil Horse Guard, absolutely not to be underestimated. Moving on now to the Dol Amroth infantry line. We've got some Tarnostian shield bearers. I think it's just 1 company here. There's a company of the Amroth Halberdiers, which are going to be acting as a support unit. And speaking of support units, got a reserve company here of Doranordal Pikemen, in addition to a reserve company of the Edelon Men-at-Arms. The main line of Engsfitz's army is going to be composed of a couple companies of Edelon Men-at-Arms and the Doranordal Pikemen, all bricked together here to support one another, making a very strong anvil for the Dol Amroth cavalry companies. Over here, Marksmen of Tirith Air, not exactly the greatest archer unit in the world. Dol Amroth not exactly known in this mod for their ranged prowess. However, these guys are quite tanky. They do decent damage, and like many other higher tier units, they can do things like deploy stakes or have fire arrows, so makes them a little bit more of a utility unit. They're great at soaking up damage. But over here, we got 2 companies of the mainline archer unit for Dol Amroth, 2 units of the Dor and Urnal archers. Fairly robust skirmishing lineup for Dol Amroth. Yeah, we'll see how that pays off for him. And I think that just about does it for his infantry lineup, except for, of course, how could we forget the Guards of the Haven? And this is where Prince Imrahil himself is going to be chilling in this battle. He's going to be leading from the front, encouraging his men to fight on. The Guards of the Haven previously, I believe, gave a huge amount of morale. It was like +5 in 100 meters, just because we didn't really have anything else there to put in its place that would make sense for this unit. But now they are, as are many General's Bodyguards that are more offensively oriented, they have +10 morale in 25 meters, as opposed to the massive radius that they had previously. So now they're a little bit more of like a localized cure to instability on your lineup, rather than being able to buff your entire army, which I think is a little bit better. That pretty well does it, except for, of course, the Aerotherum of Dol Amroth. Without getting too far off track, units like the Alcarondas Faithful and the Aerotherum of Dol Amroth are really part of a greater experiment. We wanted to add some more knight units into the game, but we didn't want them to just be stupidly overpowered, and for there to be just a no-brain choice between bringing them and maybe bringing something else. So units like the Alcarondas Faithful and like the Aerotherum are quite potent, but they're smaller, a little bit less expensive, but still nonetheless very expensive, each weighing in at about 1,400 gold. And yeah, there's less of them in the unit, so it's easier for them to be crippled or to be destroyed earlier on. So you got to be a little bit more careful with them, but they are still nonetheless very potent. And for Dol Amroth, you can potentially bring up to 2 knight units. That is, they can synergize quite well with the Haven Knights. Well, that's gonna do it for Dol Amroth's army. Let's move on to this flanking force over here, led by none other than Kuroguro-chan himself. He's brought some Sindar of the Girdle. Oh, and by the way, he's going to be playing as Mirkwood, in case you didn't see that. He's going to be bringing some Sindar of the Girdle here, who, despite appearances, have a small shield value. It's not clear yet whether or not they're going to keep it. They may end up getting a shield on the model, which is what that shield value was added preemptively to represent. But they may not end up getting it. We'll just see. But Sindar of the Girdle, 2 HP Spear Cavalry, very, very potent. Not quite to the level of melee knights or your regular knight units, but still, nonetheless, can be very deadly. Over here, got some Forest Wardens, 1 unit of Forest Wardens, a couple companies of the Hiri Auth, and you can't see them, but there's a couple company of the, I feel like Mirkwood Axemen, or I can't quite remember what their name is anymore. It used to be like Hetheli Tower or something like that. If you guys are familiar with the mod, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Also, a couple companies of the remnant of Amon Lank, the 2-handed axe and bow hybrid units. So Kuro's really going to be doubling down on his elites. And 2 units of Ents, believe it or not. We're going to see a double Ent rush army today, and they're going to be backed up by the Palace Guard. So this is very much a deadly wrecking ball that could be used to great effect against a faction like, say, Numenor, for example, who's really invested heavily into their pike units. They're going to want to keep their formation cohesive, and if the Mirkwood Elves can manage to break that up, well, then they might be able to bring down the Numenorians with their quality. That being said, 1-to-1, the Numenorians match up pretty well against the Elves. This is going to be an interesting matchup. I see no reason to delay the beginning any further, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. And so it has begun, and this time it's going to be the red team that makes the first move. Of course, with Kuro's rush army over there, they're going to be extremely aggressive. Dol Amroth moving into the center, into a position where they can potentially threaten both armies at the same time. And it looks like the plan is going to be to use Dol Amroth as the anvil to Kuro's hammer. He's going to try a massive flanking movement with all of those Ents and those powerful units. He's going to try and crumble Numenor's line while they fight against the men of Dol Amroth. At least that's my prognostication. It certainly seems to be that way based on the deployment of both of the red team players. Over here on the blue team's side of things, you can see them repositioning themselves to try and meet the advance of Kuroguro-chan head-on. Certainly going to make the most out of their pike units and out of their bow units if they can keep the Elves of Mirkwood occupied, maybe do a little bit of damage to them on the approach. They are quite lightly armored after all, and try and catch a lot of those very deadly and very high-skill Elven units on the ends of their pike wall. They could break that Elven army on their phalanx if they are able to do so, and certainly Muffins is going to do everything that he can to ensure that he has that opportunity. Meanwhile, over here, Imladris taking up position with a couple companies here of the Archers of Rivendell. A nice little double line formation. Lots of good reasons to do this, especially if you're thinking that you may need to fall back. One company can fall back while the other is able to cover their retreat. Makes a nice little combination, but of course a little bit of overshot can potentially end up skewering some of your Archers of Rivendell or your second company, regardless of what it happens to be, in behind them. What do we have here? Dol Amroth slowly but surely moving forward, trying to keep pace with his ally. It seems that they're going to try and coordinate this such that Numenor is going to be their first victim. Numenor is going to suffer the brunt of the assault as Kuroguro-chan begins to close ranks, and Muffins is going to go for another tactical retreat here and move as quickly as he possibly can out of the claws of Kuroguro-chan, who, as you can see here, is in quite close attendance. The Mirkwood Elves have had a very long way to run so far, and whether intended or not, one of the consequences of this is that by the time that they get there, they're going to be a little bit more tired than the Numenorians. You can see there's a little bit of a fatigue differential here, as most of these Elven units are warmed up, whereas the Numenorians are still very much fresh. Kuroguro-chan, I think, sees an opportunity here to maybe get a little bit of a little bit of a surprise charge, take some bites out of the Númenórean straggler. So he's going to be very aggressive here with the Sindar of the Girdle. And Muffins, I think, is going to be... I think he's going to see it coming, and it looks like he's probably going to be okay. He's tightening, closing ranks here. That's the expression I wanted. Closing ranks with the Elves of Imladris. I think he's going to be able to make it. Yeah, Alcarondas Faithful moving in to cover the retreat of this this final company here of Romena Sentinels, and that is going to drive back the Sindar of the Girdle. Oh, Kurogoro-chan, turning around, but thinking better of it. Now he's going to pull out of there, and Muffins is going to be free to reform his lines. He's already got his skirmishing companies in a good position here, well protected behind his phalanx. He could use them to great effect once those Mirkwood forces begin to close upon his phalanx. Meanwhile, over here, the Elves of Imladris are able to put some flanking fire into these two companies of Doranernal archers, doing a fair amount of damage to at least one of them. They haven't really taken a lot of damage in return. So far, the early skirmish against Dol Amroth is going quite clearly in favor of Imladris. But Dol Amroth is really just here to provide a constant threat that these two units are going to have to respond to. And then, of course, once Kurogoro-chan goes in, it seems likely to me that Engsvitz is going to move in to support him and try and smash through the enemy center. And certainly, if Kurogoro-chan wants to send a little bit of support his way, a couple companies of Ents would be great for bisecting this this cohesive enemy formation and causing a whole lot of havoc. Let's see what we got here. Another advance from Kurogoro-chan. The two companies of the Remnant of Amon-like have shown themselves. They're going to move forward and try and skirmish with the Romena Marksmen. Romena Marksmen, however, are already set up, and they're going to have the first say in this argument. And some of the Remnant of Amon-like, they're going to find themselves on the business end of some Númenórean steel bows, which is not a place that you want to be. It's one of those early weapons of mass destruction in the world of Middle-earth. Over here, we can see Imladris being very aggressive. Got the Noritinal cavalry moving forward. There's a big gap in Dol Amroth's formation here. Their advance is a little bit kind of scattered. It's kind of all over the place. A little bit of chaos going on in among the ranks of the Dol Amroth units. A couple companies over here, the Riders of Bruinen. It looks like they've been going toe-to-toe with the Parathil, and they've certainly come off better for it. Parathil over here, trying to go toe-to-toe with those Elven units, but damn, the Riders of the Bruinen ain't no joke, and they're really giving it to the Parathil. We're going to have to beat a fighting retreat here, I think. Probably in this kind of situation, the best thing to try and do, especially against experienced players who generally don't tend to keep their fire at will on, is to fire a volley, retreat, and retreat out of range, and then circle back, fire another volley. Try and get your enemy to maybe come a little bit closer than what they mean to. Certainly can be the case if you're if they're not paying as much attention, and maybe just draw them into position that they would prefer not to be in. Otherwise, just going toe-to-toe with them like this, it doesn't seem to be working out for the Parathil Randirum. So I think a change in tactic is called for at this point. Go ahead and kick it up to 1x speed here. It looks like both of the red team players are pretty well within range to launch an assault. They're certainly within striking distance of Númenor, who's actually a little bit out of... I don't know if this is intentional or not, but there is definitely a big gap here, which could prevent these two forces from coming to each other's aid. Certainly does leave Númenor open to a surround by elements of the Dol Amroth army, and of course with the Elves of Mirkwood now charging towards them, that could really be a problem and potentially be the undoing of that Dol Amroth army, depending on circumstances. Realm of Mirkwood charging forward. The Romena Marksmen letting loose one final volley before they retreat behind the phalanx of the Alcarondes Legion and the Romena Sentinels. And this is where it's all going to kick off. Mirkwood being the first into the fray. Imladris being extremely aggressive, trying to put some pressure here on Dol Amroth so that they can't both double team their ally here, or his ally here, Númenor. What do we got? Looks like a sudden shift in momentum by the Realm of Mirkwood. They might try and catch out Imladris and crush them between their two armies, but I don't think Númenor is going to allow this to happen. You can see a couple advanced companies here, one of the Alcarondes Legion, another of the Sentinels, moving forward to prevent all these Elven units from moving onto his allies' left wing and surrounding and crushing him. So now Mirkwood has a significant number of his troops bogged down in a fight against Numenor, a fight that they are certainly not about to win. However, some of the most deadly elements of his army managed to make it into this attempted envelopment. The Ents charging into the Imladris sentries, one of the best units on the Imladris lineup to act as an anchor in this case, and they are tearing them to pieces. The Imladris sentries can't fight in formation. If they had a little bit more backup, they might be able to hold their ground a bit better against the Ents, but honestly, they're just going to toss them about, use that armor-piercing damage to extremely devastating effect against those heavily armored elves, and DI consequently is going to be forced to commit his Keepers of Aglos to try and keep that line steady. Oh man, look at that. The sentries down to like 10% of their fighting potential in just a matter of moments. Over here, the Eldarin Wehadu Hatal fighting the good fight, trying to keep the combined Dol Amroth and Mirkwood forces at bay. Let's see what we got going on over here. Numenorian Lancers charging into battle against the Sindar of the Girdle. Probably not the best place for them to be, but they are also here supporting a unit of the Alcarondas Legion, or the Alcarondas Faithful, rather. And the Alcarondas Faithful are certainly more powerful, being melee knights, than a spear bodyguard. The Sindar of the Girdle are definitely coming off worse for wear. Grochan's going to pull them out of there as quickly as possible and reposition and try and save what he can of that unit of Sindar. Meanwhile, over here, what have we got? Some Parathil Horse Guard charging into the rear of the Eldarin Wehadu Hatal, trying to support the Tarnostian Shield Bearers, who are sorely outmatched in this 1v1 against a very elite, very deadly Elven Spear unit. We've got some Parathil Horse Guard now behind the lines of both Rivendell and Numenor. Ooh, and the Imladris infantry is really suffering. They don't have an answer now that the Sentinels have been wiped off the map by the Ents to the pike block of Doran Urnal. Parathil Horse Guard going to get a beautiful charge here into the rear of the Swords of Rivendell. However, they're going to be countercharged by the combined might of the Elder Rinway Standard Bearers and the Doomsmen of Warda. And that could be the end of the Parathil Horse Guard. They are certainly down to crippled levels of strength, essentially. And I think they're down to 3. Yeah, and we're going to see them rout off, and that's going to be the end for them there. But the center of Imladris' army, this is exactly what they wanted. It has been broken to pieces. Numenor trying to do something to hold the line. Eldarin Wehadu Hatal still about half strength, trying to hold back some of the Elven infantry, but now that that's happened, looks like Grochan's going to try and shift his momentum onto the Numenor side of things. Now the Ents have engaged the Numenorian phalanx, trying to support the flagging line of Hiri Alth and Adelon Men-at-Arms, who are suffering quite grievously and nearly on the verge of collapse. Over here, Woodland Realm Axemen being surrounded by Numenorian infantry, Alcarondas Legion, Remena Sentinels, and some Temple Executioners. They're going to make short work of this small detachment of Elves of the Woodland Realm. Meanwhile, over here, Numenorian Lancers getting absolutely flattened by the Aratherum. Looks like the Sindar of the Girdle ran off, found some help, and now the left wing of Numenor is certainly compromised. There's a lot of cavalry over here, a lot of enemy cavalry, I should specify, and they might be able to get in behind the units of Remena Sentinels here and begin to turn the tide, and certainly does pave the way for the flattening of the Numenorian skirmishers, who hitherto have been able to fire pretty well freely at both the forces of Dol Amroth and the Elves of the Woodland Realm. We hear Aratherum of Dol Amroth getting a nice, it's an okay, I suppose, charge in support of their footmen there. Remena Sentinels managing to drive them back. The Ents battering apart the Numenorian phalanx, but after the heavy fighting that they've been through, it doesn't seem like the Ents have what it takes to carry this assault for Team Red. And I think we're going to start to see the Ents begin to get chopped down here. But let's see, there's some important stuff going on in the back. You can see the Doomsmen of Warda, all, in fact, or at least at the very least most of the Elven cavalry has been brought in behind the Dol Amroth lines, and this is where Ents is going to try and activate some of his reserve companies to keep his back lines safe. Doran Urnal pikemen here trying to zone out some of the High Elven cavalry, doing what they can, but they are a little bit too slow to keep pace with all of these companies of heavy cavalry. Doomsmen of Warda hacking apart these Doran Urnal archers, and Enx's backlines and his skirmishers are in the worst kind of danger. Over here, we got the remnant of Amon-like being charged down by the Elder Rinway shield bearers. Though they took that charge head on, they've got a pretty hefty pool of melee defense and decent armor, so they will be able to stand up to that. However, yeah, check this out. This is where positional play becomes incredibly important. The Numenorian Lancers do not charge nearly as hard as the Doomsmen of Warda. but nonetheless, they're going to do more damage here because the Remnant of Ammon-like are facing the other direction. And believe it or not, melee defense counts towards fending off damage from charging units of cavalry and charging units generally. So the Remnant of Ammon-like, they're going to take a pretty savage beating from that small company of Numenorean Lancers. Meanwhile, over here, Eldarin Way Standard Bearers charging a second time into the Remnant of Ammon-like, getting a few more kills, but most importantly, preventing these units from firing and supporting the infantry fight where Amroth and the Woodland Realm are suffering quite heavily at this point. See, the Ents have now had to be pulled out of the infantry fight as a desperation ploy to try and drive back some of the cavalry here, and they're quite good at it. They can keep pace with a lot of cavalry. Doomsmen of Varda are certainly in a lot of trouble the longer that they stay in here. The Ents are, of course, armor-piercing, so they can hack through the formidable shield and armor defenses of those heavily armored Elven Knights. Aerotherum of Dol Amroth in close attendance, supporting the Ents, and now DI is going to need to pull out of there with his Doomsmen of Varda. You can already see them getting to drop. About 5 or so have been killed in the last few moments. Riders of the Bruinen hacking apart the Dornernal archers. Not quite enough of them, and with these units here in close support, well, it looks like the little adventure here of DI into the back lines of Dol Amroth is going to end pretty quickly. Got some pikes now moving in to try and trap them between these powerful units. One a very powerful anti-cavalry unit and the other with a ton of armor-piercing damage. DI is going to need to flee out of there as quickly as possible. Ooh, a nice charge of opportunity here by the Riders of the Bruinen into the Dornernal pikemen. Going to get an okay amount of kills. Not a ton, but an okay amount. And now units here like the Marksmen of Tirith Air are going to be temporarily at least out of danger and once more able to support the main line. Speaking of the main line, however, Dornernal pikemen are doing their best, but they're certainly outclassed in this fight. This is not the strength of Dol Amroth. Their melee, not that they're melee units, their infantry companies are good, but they're really mostly average. A little bit above average, I would say. Whereas Numenor specializes in this kind of warfare, and you can see the men-at-arms and the pike units being crushed under the weight of the power of Numenor. Eldalande nobles here in close support, hacking down the Adelan men-at-arms. A few stragglers left from the Woodland Realms infantry, although most of them at this point have perished at the hands of the Numenorians. Got some reinforcements coming over here in the form of Prince Imrahil himself, leading the charge with a reserve company, or rather the battered remnants of a company of Dornernal pikemen. They're going to drive back the Eldalande nobles and move in to support their units in close quarters. Let's see what we got going on over here. It seems like the Archers of Rivendell now have begun to join the fray. Got some here, the Owlth over here, who has something to say about that. Not enough of them, I fear, to drive back the inferior, but far more numerous Archers of Rivendell. And they're no joke in melee as well, of course. Let's see what we got over here. Oh, Dornernal still in this fight, moving forward with a company of these pikemen against these reinforcements here that could be used to surround their center, or at least what remains of it over on that end. And yeah, the Archers of Rivendell plus what remains of the Swords of Rivendell would have a hard time, I think, beating that unit of pikemen. But after all, it appears that Engsvitz is going to try and move over here and concentrate his forces rather than risking being surrounded and destroyed piecemeal, which is, it's a good idea, but it also will, I think, lend itself quite nicely to the blue team's army surrounding what remains of his forces. Ents charging into the flank of these of this Numenorian pike block. Ooh, people flying all over the place. That's going to be the end of some of the Temple Executioners. This is looking pretty ugly. Pretty ugly for both sides, but I think that Numenor's quality is going to win out in this case, although still probably about five or six Ents left, about 8 in total, in fact. Meanwhile, back here, the Temple Guard and the Romana Marksmen have so far managed to hold their ground. It seems like they've been fighting... Ah, the Palace Guard. This is what the Palace Guard have been doing, trying to shut down the skirmish line from Team Blue, which I believe up until this point has been able to fire pretty well unhindered at their opponents, which is a huge boon. Yeah, this kind of support, it really does add up over time. Even if archers can't do a ton of damage quickly currently in the mod against most units, especially if they're heavily armored and shielded, this long-term effect here of constantly pelting their enemies has certainly paid off. And now the Dol Amroth forces ooh, a little bit of lag there in the center, have all but collapsed under the combined arms of Numenor. And actually, it's mostly just Numenor, I think, at this point. Erethium of Dol Amroth charging into the Temple Executioners, supporting the Ents. The Ents, however, are losing to this fearsome close-quarters supremacy unit. Temple Executioners, as we all know, ain't no joke. And even with the aid of the Erethium, the Ents are hard-pressed to beat back these heavily armored and elite Numenorians dedicated to the service of Melkor. Elder Ringway Standard Bearer is still running around, still being a pain. Erethium of Dol Amroth trying to catch them off guard, shut them down. Doomsman of Varda still around, still 4 of them, and it seems like the back lines of Dol Amroth and Mirkwood are pretty well in tatters. They have driven back the cavalry of their opponents for the time being, but if you look over here, especially the Temple Guard, all these Romana marksmen, the blue team's skirmishing forces are in far, far better shape. I think we got over here. Some of the Elder Ringway archers now have joined the fray, having not taken a single casualty up until this point. There's still some archers of Rivendell left, a fairly healthy number of them, and now the surround begins on Dol Amroth's center, and I think this is going to be the beginning of the end for Team Red. Try as they might, with the Erethium charging into the rear of these archers of Rivendell, getting a fair few amount of kills. The Ents are pretty well expended at this point. Just a small handful of them still remaining on the battlefield. Elder Ringway archers pressing hard against the Doranordal pikemen. I don't know how they are standing their ground at this point. Might be because of the presence of the Haven Guard. Eldolande Nobles, speaking of, charging into the Haven Guard, getting a decent amount of damage. Again, positional play here, extremely important. The Eldolande Nobles do not even have an armor-piercing charge, but charging into the rear of a unit like this, it matters. It matters hugely. And a good deal of those guards of the Haven, probably about 6 or so, died in that charge from the Eldolande Nobles. Ooh, the Eldolande Nobles almost getting caught out by some halberdiers being brought in as reinforcements. They could be a problem for the Elder Ringway archers, especially when charging in support of the Remnant of Amon-like. This is a lot of armor piercing coming the way of the Elder Ringway archers. And you can see them beginning to suffer for it. Still one Ent left in there. Oh, and there goes Prince Imrahil himself getting poked to death by a Romana Sentinel. I think this might be where Dol Amroth loses all hope. Yes, with the death of their prince, the fear of Eru has been put into the hearts of what remains of Dol Amroth's army. I think yeah, there goes the halberdiers. They weren't long for this world. They did manage to take a fair amount of the Elder Ringway archers with them. Remnant of Amon-like being overwhelmed. Now that the Dol Amroth forces in the center have finally been defeated, the rest of the Numenorian host is now freed up to steamroll everything that remains of Dol Amroth and, of course, of the Woodland Realm. And honestly, there's not much. Look at this, 95 to 76. Not exactly the closest battle, but a very intense and very micro-heavy battle. A lot of great back and forth between two, I would say, equally skilled teams. All the players in this game are longtime veterans of the Discord, and of course one of them is the lead developer, so you know that he knows what he's about. A really entertaining game. Thank you so much to DI for sending it in to me. Now let's see who's still remaining. What do we got here? Remnant of Amon-like. Of course it's going to be the Wood Elves, who are the last men standing. Being surrounded and hacked down by a combination of elves of Imladris and the men of Numenor. Ooh. And that guardsman of Amon-like just got massacred by the Elder Ringway archer. And what do we got here? Elder Ringway archers. They took a lot of damage really quickly. I'm actually quite surprised by that. And yet more Remnant of Amon-like fighting it out with the Romana marksmen, where they're about to be surrounded and completely annihilated. And I think that the Wood Elf army basically fought to the death in this matchup. They did have a lot of elite units, though, so that's not entirely surprising. And here we are, down to the last 100 or so frames. Good night, sweet prince. There goes the Wood Elven army. And there's our final percentage, 77 to 96. Really good game. I think it could have gone a couple different ways. The cavalry certainly of Team Blue was used to great effect. They used it to shut down the skirmishers from the red team. Meanwhile, they managed to keep their skirmishers online pretty well for the entire game. The Elder Enemy Archers, very powerful, potent unit. They managed to fire their entire ammunition pool without losing a single man, and pretty well so did the Archers of Rivendell. They took very light casualties, so it really does show how important it can be to try and keep those support units online. On their own, they will not win a game for you. Unlike, I think it's like 0.97 or something like that, where the Elder Enemy, not 0.97, it's like 0.96 instead of 0.96.1. The Elder Enemy Archers used to be armor piercing, and you could win games pretty well on the back of those skirmishers. But now, not so much, and that especially does hold true for Imladris. The skirmishers can be useful, and we saw it in this battle, but that's one of the reasons I enjoyed this battle so much. We can really start to see the specialization of units really be brought, of factions rather, really be brought to the forefront. Mirkwood now has a rush build that's open to them. It probably won't be in the form that you've seen in this game. I don't think they're going to be able to take more than one unit of Ents, and we'll probably just increase the red price on them so that there's one unit, and they have to diversify a little bit more and utilize the rest of the roster. But you can see that Mirkwood can be far more aggressive, or they could be skirmish heavy. Being skirmish heavy might have been a little bit more useful for them in this particular battle. And Numenor as well. You saw that this game was won or lost pretty well on the backs of their infantry, and the same goes for Imladris as well. Their cavalry was just so useful. Their infantry was pretty good as well. But yeah, that's one of the reasons I really like this game. Aside from the fact that we had a ton of really skilled players playing against each other, it does show you what we've been working really hard on in 0.97, and I hope it makes you guys excited to see battles like this. But in any case, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye!